Established in January 1974, Kerry Cooperative Creameries Limited, or Kerry Co-op, celebrates a special anniversary, 50 years. This podcast series has been created by Mary Lavery Carrig, based on the first board photographed together in January 1974. This is Mary, and you are welcome to A Chat with Mary, Voices from Kerry Co-op's story. In this episode, episode 5, we hear from Michael Wall, son to the late Frank Wall of Tarbert. Frank Wall played a significant role in the formation of Kerry Co-op.
I am the son of Frank Wall, first chairman of Kerry Co-op. My father died in 1985, aged 72. Following his primary education in Tarbert, my father went to Mungret College, Limerick, a Jesuit boarding school. Following his education there, he went working with Pearce's of Wexford, an Irish company that made mainly agricultural equipment, ploughs and things like that. His father, Michael Wall, also worked for that company and was their head salesman for Britain and Ireland. My father got TB in the 1930s and lost one lung, and he returned to Tarbert to continue farming with my grandmother, Mary Wall. When he returned, he tried his hand at many things. I remember as a child we had sheep, we had dry stock, we had cows. He experimented a lot. He also got involved in Hereford cattle. In 1946, he built a silo and he made silage. That time, the silo was on the side of a hill, so you poured in the grass in from the top and you took it out at the side, and it was very manual, so I think that was a failure. He also tried his hand at growing tomatoes, and I remember as a child we had 2 large glass houses. And he sold tomatoes in every village and into Listowel. A basket of tomatoes was £12, like the baker's dozen. And my job at times was to pick the tomatoes and clean them and weigh them and put them in the basket. And then he would go to Listowel, Glynn, Tarbert, Ballylongford, anywhere at all where he could sell them. I also have 3 other brothers, my half-twin Gerard, Pierce and Frank Jr. They also helped out on the farm, and they also went to Mungret with me. There was 4 of us together in Mungret at the one time in the boarding school. It was like being at home all the time. My father was a very progressive man. He only spoke well about anybody, including people who didn't do him any good. And I just was in awe of this man that he never said a bad word about anybody. I must now mention my mother, Eileen Pierce from Triple, Ballybunion. She married my father in 1946. And I must say that with regard to my mother, she worked inside the house and outside the house. And only for her, we would have had nothing, because my father got involved in what I would call farmer politics and was on the road all the time. Never at home. And I'll tell you a story about him. He had an uncle who was a bishop in America, Bishop Edmund Fitzmaurice. He was bishop in Wilmington, Delaware. And he came home every summer for 3 months. And he threw off his clerical garb and he dressed like a tramp. So anybody meet him that didn't know him wouldn't have a clue who he was. So one day this guy came looking for my father and the bishop, and he was sitting on the seat at the top of the hill, and this man arrived looking for my father. And he hadn't a clue who the bishop was. And he said, "I'm looking for Frank Wall." So the bishop said to him, "I'm sorry," he says, "sir." He says, "He only collects his post here." My father, Frank, was a founding member of the ICMSA in the 1950s. And he was on the executive committee, so therefore he was travelling a lot, and he did a lot of travelling, we'd say, within Kerry, Limerick, Cork, maybe into Tipperary. And occasionally, when I was 18 years plus, I used to drive him to various places, and we wouldn't get home till God knows when, late hour in the morning. In the 1960s, he was very much involved when there were marches to Dublin by the ICMSA looking for a better price for milk. And he at one stage, he was outside Dáil Éireann on a picket, and he was arrested. Because I saw him on television when I was down in Cork in UCC. I saw it on the 6 o'clock news, him being arrested by the Gardaí. So I'm not too sure whether he spent a night in Mountjoy or in the local Garda station, but he was arrested anyway. So he has a record. In the late 1950s, he got involved with a group of self-minded farmers, and they set up the Listowel Livestock Mart in 1959. And they bought out the rights of fairs in Listowel from Lord Listowel or his agents. This mart turned out to be a very, very successful company. He was first chairman of Listowel Livestock Mart from his foundation in 1959 until his death in 1985. An Bord Bainne was set up in 1961 as a semi-state company by the government to help Irish co-ops and creameries to sell their dairy products, especially butter, on the British market and on European and world markets, so as not to be competing against each other. My father was elected one of the first directors of An Bord Bainne, and he represented at that time the milk suppliers to the various dairy disposal companies in Clare and Cork and Kerry. He was also chairman of Shannon Meats in Rathkeale for a number of years. So this gave you an idea of how diverse he was in his outlook on life. My dad's story with regard to the formation of Kerry Co-op was that he looked upon the industry in Ireland as very, very fragmented. You had all these small co-ops, and you had these dairy disposal companies that had replaced co-ops that went broke many, many years ago, maybe at the turn of the last century. At the time, I was away in college, so I wasn't really au fait with what he was doing, other than that I knew that he was involved. So when it came to the setting up of Kerry Co-op, the small co-ops in Kerry came together with the dairy disposal companies, and they set up Kerry Co-op. My father was involved. He was the first chairman for a period of time. He held Dennis Brosnan and Hugh Friel in high regard, because I often remember him speaking to me about the pair of them. And he used to say to me, he says, Dennis Brosnan is the man with the ideas, and Hugh Friel is the man with the monetary acumen to carry out Dennis's wishes. My father, to me, as far as I'm concerned, was a gentleman. He had one motto. He said many times to me, he says, if you have nothing good to say about a person, say nothing. On behalf of my family, I would like to say how proud we are of our father, Frank, who did so much to help his fellow farmers. I am delighted to say that my son Shane now is a representative on the Kerry Co-op board, and he is continuing a family tradition started by my father.
I wish to say a sincere thank you to Michael Wall. Thank you too to Charlie Nelligan for concertina music. You have been listening to a podcast series, episode 5, from A Chat with Mary, Voices from Kerry Co-op's Story. This is Mary Lavery Carrig, and thank you for listening.